Recording in progress.
Thank you. I'm now going to call the Thursday, December 5th work session meeting of Narberth Borough Council to order. Let's go ahead to the Pledge of Allegiance. All of each. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. West, will you call, or should we ask Alan to do it? Maybe we should call the roll.
I've got it. Council President Fred Bush.
Here.
Council Vice President Cindy Rickards.
Here.
Councilmember Ira Winston.
Here.
Councilmember Jean Bura.
Here.
Councilmember Jim Spear. Here. Councilmember Michael Gaudini.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Salmonson.
Here.
And Mayor Andrea Deutsch.
Here.
All right, I'll just say we have the Dickens Festival coming up on Sunday, so I'm sure several people will mention that. But I hope to see many folks out there. That's it for my comments.
You took my thunder.
You can reiterate it. It's important to just keep mentioning
We
Dickens
have
Festival.
our annual Dickens Fest coming up Sunday from 2 to 4 p.m. in the downtown. I would encourage every,
Noon.
12, what did I say?
2.
I meant to say noon.
I'm just performing at 12 at noon, you're trying to cut
Yeah,
it off.
no, thank you, I meant to say noon. Noon to 4, that's correct. I hope everybody comes out and supports our small businesses, does their holiday shopping in supporting our small businesses. It's a really important time of year for them so that they can carry on for the rest of the year. So that's really important. Keep in mind, streets in the downtown will be closed, probably starting, I'm going to guess around 11. So you won't be able to cut through there, so be careful as you're driving around town. And enjoy the day. It's supposed to be lovely.
Okay. We have one action item today. Resolution 2024-25.
I move that Borough Council adopt Resolution 2024-25, designating and authorizing the Borough Manager and Council President as authorized signatories for PennDOT reimbursement agreement number whatever related to the North Narberth Avenue Bridge project.
Second.
So, you know that I don't typically like to have action at the work session meeting, but this is an administrative action that's needed as a follow-up to the North Narberth Avenue Bridge project becoming 100% federal paid for construction. This is required since the original agreement was signed way back when, 5 borough managers ago. Because we need to reallocate it, we need this authorization, which was also done at that same time. And once it's authorized, I can upload it into the PennDOT system and sign 3 different documents, and we should be good.
Any questions? All right, let us vote on this resolution authorizing Borough Manager and the Borough Council President as signatories. All those in favor? Okay, it is unanimous. Okay, and let's move on to our presentation item on the Master Parks Plan. All right.
Great, we'll take the floor. Hello, I'm Sarah Leeper with Simone Collins Landscape Architecture. I have Bill Collins here with me as well, and then Rebecca and, Dennis, apologize, from the committee are both here as well. So we have a brief overview of the Master Plan Park project that we'll quick go through with you. This is just informational to kind of familiarize you with the process to date. Following this, and we can go next to the schedule, that'll make sense. Following this, the plan will be up for public review for a month, in the month of December going into mid-January. During that time, we'll also be sharing the plan with DCNR and the County Planning Department to get any feedback and comments from them as well. We'll be following up with a meeting where it would be the recommendation based on any final incorporation of comments from the public, committee, county, you, DCNR. Will get finalized into the plan and then recommended adoption of that plan at your February meeting. Yes.
Let me just quick note administratively that we will have public comment for this meeting at the end of all of our discussion items. So go ahead.
This is just a great overview of all the public input we've had to date. We did have 2 public meetings. Both were very well attended. We had 3 stakeholder meetings reaching out to various groups, 15 key person interviews, and then our survey response was close to 800, which I believe that's about 5% of your borough population responded, which is a very high response rate. So we worked to kind of incorporate all this feedback throughout the process into what you'll be seeing tonight. Just a little
So
slide.
I can say
Yeah.
800 is significantly more than 5%.
I think what it is we took out, when we figured out your percentage, and you're right, it probably is more, but we took out the people from surrounding boroughs, or
Okay.
municipalities. I just wanted to put this up here. I think it's always good to refer back to the vision statement. This vision statement was set out in your request for proposals, and we've worked with the committee to kind of finesse it a little bit. But really just looking at, when we looked at recommendations and also priorities for recommendations, we're really trying to focus in on accessibility throughout your park, so really making sure we're making connections both to and within your parks, and then also making sure we're providing amenities for a wide range of people.
Sorry, the slides aren't advancing.
Yeah, I
on
understand there's
Zoom.
some lag.
No, the slides aren't advancing on Zoom, so I'm trying to
Got it.
get my tech support here on it.
So we're going to go through each plan. Station Square, this is the draft plan that we ended up with. We started with the 2022 Circle the Square plan as kind of our starting point. In that study, connections to the train station and to the underpass for accessibility were identified. So we were kind of working in the framework of that plan. What we have revised and what we're recommending in this draft plan is incorporation of some parking in the circle. That was a big concern, came up at the second public meeting, was the loss of the 14 spots in the circle, if there's a way to recapture some of that. So we have revised the plan to show the 7 angled-in parking spaces coming off of the side driveway that provides access to 230. And then we also added parking back in front of the State Store building, those 4 spaces there, which originally had been kind of a BMP tree planting area in the original concept. With that, the central square space in K, we still are maintaining the idea of kind of a alley of trees on either side of that central space to kind of delineate the traffic flow into the station on one side and then kind of an open plaza on the other. And then central to that would be kind of a low stage, so tiered lawn leading up to a performance stage that would share a pavilion cover with the station platform itself. We'll talk a little bit more about traffic circulation, but in this concept we kind of looked at what it would look like if the revision to Haverford Ave, reversing the one-way direction. We'll talk a little bit more when we talk about Narberth Park. But what that does do here is it sets up kind of a kiss and walk right at M, drop-off being on the passenger side, and it also allows for a bike lane to share the road and not need to be a contraflow lane coming into downtown from the park. You can go next. So we did look at a cost estimate in 2022. We're still working with that cost estimate. We did look at some of the stormwater numbers and did put inflation escalation rate, of 6% into some of our numbers. A lot still kind of apply in terms of paving, reconstruction, things like that. So when we're looking at this, just want to remind you the costs don't include the stairs and the ramps to get to SEPTA. That's kind of thought of as being part of a SEPTA station budget. That really is outside of the borough's need. That SEPTA needs to kind of provide those amenities in terms of accessibility to their platform. But we are looking at 1.1 million to kind of reconstruct that whole plaza, and then this idea of the street kind of coming across and being one space when you're using a festival space for pedestrians across Haverford Ave to the north side of the block. Next. Looking at Elm Grove, we did kind of come up with a draft plan. Everyone kind of acknowledged that this area wanted to be kind of a passive park. We don't have good driveway access into this area in terms of, one, you have your existing floodplain, it dominates the site, and then also just the geometry of Wynwood Ave really precludes any sort of driveway coming into this area safely. So we do see this as a walkable destination. Two big connection items that we're looking at is from Elmwood Ave, reconstructing an accessible bridge at that point. That's a little more welcoming. The current bridge is kind of at the end of its life, usable life. And we recommend that that kind of be paired with the stream restoration. Currently there's gabion walls that form the abutments of those bridges, and with any stream restoration work you do here, you would want to kind of address those walls as well, since they're also nearing the end of their life. Gabions do have kind of an age limit when they're being exposed to extreme water conditions. Also, a key component was really dividing Wynwood Road from the park itself and creating separation. So we are proposing a nice wide sidewalk there, kind of as a trail. So that's looking at 10-foot wide, and then a verge with tree plantings between that trail and Wynwood itself, and then fencing within that verge to kind of really create a separation between the road and the park itself. In terms of once you get into the park, the big idea here is a stream restoration where we would be expanding the capability of the floodplain and the stream to really control higher volumes of water during storm events. So that's where you're seeing that kind of dark green would be that expanded kind of floodplain wetland area. We're proposing a small boardwalk through that area with a kind of observation pavilion, which is kind of angled so it's looking long way up the stream and away from the neighboring property, for a small educational outdoor classroom opportunity there. We are maintaining kind of a large open lawn at F, and then on the end of that lawn is a nature-based play area, and then looking at a walkway that would connect from the bridge through the park and then kind of back up towards the underpass. We are recommending a slightly improved walkway to the underpass. You know, there was a lot of talk throughout the whole process about how to improve the underpass itself, and there's a lot of constraints there. So really within the scope of what we're looking at, there's really no good solutions for that underpass. There needs to be more studies from a traffic engineering point of view to really explore ideas, and we do outline what those ideas are in the report itself. Go next. So with Elm Grove, we were looking at, for the proposed site improvements, just under $700,000. And then what we do start to put in, and I should have gone over this before, are just kind of placeholder contingencies. Mobilization is kind of a contractor to get on site and get everything set up and start work. Erosion and sedimentation controls are exactly how they sound during construction. They're there to keep pollutants out of our streams. Stormwater improvements, you know, every time we put impervious in the ground, we have to accommodate for stormwater. So here we're kind of holding a contingency of 5%, which is a modest contingency because we're not proposing a lot of impervious at this site, and we're doing a lot of natural restoration, which will credit our stormwater. Carrying a 10% construction contingency, and then a 12% design and engineering. So all said, that kind of starts to become $1 million project. So there's a lot of potential here if you go next. With the stream restoration, sorry, I jumped ahead one thing. So with phasing, you know, we do look at the stream restoration as something that partners would want to work with you to get that done. That's a kind of low-hanging fruit from a funding point of view. A lot of people would want to help with that type of improvement. So we do see that in kind of the bridge as a first phase. And we try to kind of target phases to kind of what we consider a fundable phase, right? But that's not to say that phases couldn't be put together. And you'll see that as we start to look at an approach. So that phase 1 is really the stream restoration, getting that bridge access in place. Phase 2 are those streetscape kind of safety improvements, and then phase 3 would be your recreational improvements. So if we look at next in terms of targeting funds for this, our biggest one that we'd recommend is that you explore NIFWIF funding. So that's National Water and Wildlife Foundation. So they have priorities for both the Delaware Basin as well as the Chesapeake Basin. So with them, yeah, I think go next. Sorry, I thought I said next.
I heard next. I didn't know if it was a prize.
So you know, we could easily kind of, they are a 50-50 match, but you can match state funds since they're federal fund. So pairing that with a DCNR grant, also looking at DCD, which is Department of Community and Economic Development. You can pair that with the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources to each other, and then also recommend going to Montgomery County as well. 100,000 is kind of their typical, big grant. They do award up to 200, but 100 is kind of achievable with them. And then some municipal funds, that gets you close to that 900,000. So this is a project that you could easily start to look at and maybe getting a couple phases done at once if you really approached it and put all the money together in a smart way. DCD is one of the more competitive. You really have to work with your senators and your reps to kind of go after those funds. I'm sure you guys have experience with that. But they do have to kind of negotiate and say this is an important project at the state level. DCNR is really a value-based, so it's as good as your application is whether it gets awarded. NIFWIF, we've had really good success with tapping into NIFWIF. They really are excited to do recreation-oriented restoration projects. That's something that they find a lot of value in these days. Next. So looking at Narberth Park, this draft plan, we went through initial concepts. We did some refined concepts. I think we even had feedback from the refined concepts that all led to this draft plan. So a lot of feedback went into this park. Obviously this park is the heart and soul of your community in some ways. And so there's a lot of uses that are met here and just a lot of consideration that had to be given as we developed this draft plan. We'll kind of go through each half. We'll look at the court half first and go next and kind of go through what has developed there, and then we'll kind of look over at the western edge of the park. So here really the big idea is kind of making sure we start to define entrances into the park. So we kind of have a new little plaza at the library with some tables there for people to gather, have their morning coffee. That opens up into an improved lawn area. And then off to the side of that is the improved play yard area as well. One of the big ideas here was kind of looking for an area to provide opportunities for both taught play as well as 5 to 12-year-olds, but not necessarily section everything off so that it's easier for caregivers to navigate and kind of watch everybody in one area. We also are proposing an improved stage pavilion area that kind of orients out to that lawn, and then also some new restrooms to the rear of the library area at E. So the idea is they're having kind of 3 individual single units there that they could all be accessed. They could all easily be family oriented as well. F would be kind of improved community gardens with a small little plaza off to the side of it again for some informal gathering. And then G, we're looking at kind of an improved parking lot area, looking at the one-way flow through that parking lot so it's a little easier to navigate, and then having kind of a drop off at the back of the library there at G. This is just schematic, we don't have survey information, so there are things to consider like your existing charging station, how the public work yard, what their space needs are, but this is kind of a starting point of how you might start to reorient pavement in there, start to get trees in as well, but still kind of maintain close to the same amount of parking as you have today. Not quite the same amount though. In terms of the court area, we were tasked with looking at a skate park plaza close to 10,000 square feet. We're right at 9,950, so they didn't quite hit 10,000, but there's a lot of room there where you can kind of get some fun elements in there for kind of what we've identified as a neighborhood scale skate plaza. At I, we have a multi-purpose court for younger kids, so that's a half basketball court with 4 square, some chalk art areas as well. J is our 2 pickleball courts. As a community, I think there was a lot of debate about losing the tennis courts and how people felt about that. The idea was tennis or pickleball gave us a way to keep racket sports in the park, as well as provide opportunities for our aging kind of older population, where pickleball tends to be the key demographic that plays that. And then K is looking at kind of improved basketball courts, where really we're providing true areas for those bleachers and kind of removing them from the court area and just providing for more circulation around those courts as well. And then M would be kind of that history entrance plaza into that basketball area off of Haverford Ave, and then a new concession storage building at L. Next. So moving over into the western part of the park, a slight reconfiguration of the 60-foot baseball field at H, really just kind of tweaking it a little bit to accommodate some of the improvements around it, as well as provide accessible walkways for bleachers for patrons of those games. And then at G, just recommending some real minor improvements to the field grading as an overall. Right now that grading really kind of functions for the 90-foot baseball field and doesn't really address all the other sports that have to happen in this area. So you do have football, multiple ages of baseball playing there, soccer as well. So there's just minor grading improvements that can help all those sports kind of take control of that field and help with maintenance over the time throughout the year. At A, kind of at the corner of Windward and Haverford, we are recommending another little entrance plaza into the baseball area. And then really the biggest item over here is addressing the bleachers and just really kind of providing modern bleachers since they're currently towards the end of their life, and then also making accessible areas within those bleachers. Currently, all the bleachers are completely inaccessible when you walk through there. With that, kind of looking at a little walkway that would connect Wynwood Ave down to the bottom steps of the memorial, War Memorial, and that would kind of build into a little hillside where you pick up some space with more modern bleachers, and the amount of crowds, we're targeting about 250 people. You don't need that whole length for bleachers, so you can have some open hill area there as well, with some sitting buildings or benches, excuse me. And looking at kind of a series of kind of learning gardens along that walkway. So when there's not baseball, that kind of becomes a little quieter end of the park. Next. We did want to make sure we kind of talk about connectivity to and around Narberth Park. One of the biggest ideas is really to widen the whole sidewalk structure around the park to 10 feet. And then we also look at key crosswalk improvements, some slight realignments of the crosswalks at A for Windward and Wizard Ave, or Wynwood and Wizard Ave. Looking at kind of a realignment of how the trail comes across Wynwood Ave at Haverford, so that it kind of creates a clean transition from off-road trail to on-road trail. And this is where we're looking at the one-way direction of Haverford Ave. Again, if you were to reverse the direction, that allows for, again, a sharrowed condition instead of a contraflow lane coming from the west into downtown along that road. And then also with Windsor Ave, if that were to become one way, you would need that full width to kind of maintain stacking on Windward Ave. So, but then you also pick up parking. We estimate about 30 spaces, give or take some based off of the added parking you just kind of put back in the area. The majority of that parking you kind of pick up along the baseball field, along Haverford, and then there's some parking that you pick up along Windsor where you do start to get more parking on both sides of the road there if you just had one lane of traffic. The other big improvement, and we can go next, is at Windsor Ave and Narbrook Park, with the ability to, if you just had one lane of traffic you had to convey, you could really start to address that crosswalk, which this was one of the first concerns that was pointed out to us when we walked to the site with committee and staff, was that traffic, people speed down this road a lot. Crossing there is pretty dangerous. So with the one lane, we could do curb bump outs, which you all are familiar with from your stormwater approach, and really start to do a tabled crosswalk here to really narrow and slow down traffic, give priority to pedestrians in this area. So we just did a quick section of what this looks like. Next. So we have our existing condition of, you know, your 30-foot cartway with 5-foot sidewalks. We go next. And then what that starts to look like when you narrow down that cartway to 14 feet with your bump outs. So really the amount of pavement the pedestrians are crossing decreases significantly. And then also we looked at just a cross section, we can go next, of Haverford Ave, and just what that starts to look like as we widen the sidewalk and introduce parking, which you guys have done just recently. Next. So again, you have about a 25-foot cartway there with a 4-foot, give or take, sidewalk. And then your courts next. And then what that starts to kind of look like if you start to widen the sidewalk, you have your parallel parking and that share road condition in the right of way, and then a little bit of a buffer before you get to the new improved courts. Go next. So Narberth, again, much larger park, a lot of complexity in terms of the types of amenities that are being reconstructed within the park. So we are looking at about $3 million in improvements, and then when you look at all the contingencies on top of that, we're looking at $4.2 million. And I apologize, I can tell you right now that the percentages on the contingencies, because we are carrying a higher stormwater contingency in Narberth Park, just because we anticipate it being a little more difficult in terms of what facilities you might have to construct. The numbers are correct, the percentages are just wrong. We go, so in total we're at 4.2 million. Go next. So with phases, and I'll kind of go through these quickly, but our recommendations is looking at the playground and that Windsor crosswalk as a first phase recommendation. The playground, we've costed a poured-in-place surfacing, which this is a pretty generous sized playground. So it is a significant improvement with the play equipment as well. We've left generous allowances in that based off of a few other projects we've put out to bid recently, so we have pretty current numbers for that. Phase 2, we're looking at the community space, so kind of improving that lawn area to help with drainage in that area. It is the lowest point of the park where you kind of gather, so we want to make sure we have good drainage there. It also includes the restrooms and the pavilion stage reconstruction. Phase 3, we're recommending pickleballs and multi-use courts, and then also kind of redoing the bleachers for the baseball field. And then Phase 4 looks at the skate park. And these total numbers for each phase kind of includes all those contingencies as well based on the proposed improvements for that phase. We can go next. Phase 5 is where we start to kind of look at that sidewalk widening. With that, we also thought it would be an appropriate time to kind of redo the netting along Windsor Ave for the baseball field, which is in need of replacement. And then with Phase 6, looking at that basketball court reconstruction and the concession stands. And in general, you know, some of these things are based off of the age in terms of why we're recommending phases. You know, your basketball courts are in really good condition currently, so they're not in need of replacing, so that's why it is a lower phase. So there is some Fountainhauer suggesting the phases, but it doesn't mean that if someone comes forward and says we want to do a community fundraiser for the skate park because we really think it's important, it doesn't mean that that can't be an earlier phase. Next, the final 2 phases that we're looking at would be kind of those field improvements, and then also 8, kind of the last thing would be the parking lot. So really trying to put priority towards things that really create meaningful experiences in the park, where parking is a necessity, but maybe it's not where we want to put our money right off the bat. Next. Yeah, so that's the total, and you can keep going. So in terms of funding opportunities here, we'd really be kind of looking at the DCNR, DCED, and then MOMCO as well as kind of your big partners here. With a little bit of a bigger give from municipal funds, that $800,000, this is kind of like a phase 1, right? So this was your playground. Phase 1 was right around that $800,000 number. So there are multiple phases that are going to take place in Narberth Park. The other thing we kind of looked at was, you know, having maybe a bigger phase followed by a smaller phase, so it gives you a little easier ability to maybe combine phases, but also kind of maybe have a year where you don't have a major project going on, it's more attainable. Next. So in terms of the next steps, we have our public review period. As I said prior, we're going to be sharing this with DCR and the county. We've gotten staff feedback on a few revisions that we're going to incorporate. We intend to have the plan to the borough week of the 18th so that it can be posted online for public review.
The 18th of
December.
Okay, just making sure.
Yep, no problem.
Several months.
And then, you know, your work is kind of, once we have a final plan, start to decide if you want to pursue grants for the 2025 season. And just as you start to go into that spring, DCNR is typically an April grant, DCD is typically a May grant. So really starting to talk to your representatives early in the process to kind of make them familiar with the project and understand what your initial phase would be and kind of start to get champions for the project. I think I have one last slide here that just kind of starts to look at potential timelines. So 2025 is your grant applications. Typically they're announced in the winter. Looking at kind of that 26 into 27 being your design and engineering of a phase puts you into a winter 27 bid and a 2028 construction. And I think this is always a little bit, it's hard to think about, but I just want to give you a reality of, you know, what a phase really takes and where that puts, when the shovel hits the ground. Sometimes we always kind of lose sight that these things do take process when you're pursuing public funds or take time. With that, hopefully I tried to be as brief as possible. It's tough with 3 parts, but hopefully that gives you a little more background on the process.
Thank you.
Thank
All right, so we kind of have been looking at the draft plan. It doesn't, some of the material here was not in the draft plan that we saw. This is new.
I think the funding graphics will get that into the draft plan, but
Okay.
the funding numbers are in the draft plan.
Okay. So we've kind of been circulating it internally, and we have some comments. So I think, Michael or Dean, do you want to run through sort of the group document here, and then I'll open it up to see if there's anything else that council members want to add in addition.
You wanna, yeah, so do you wanna run through all of it then for discussion, or do you wanna take it like point, see if anyone has any?
I think everybody's seen this, and unless you've got, I'd say go ahead and run through it, and then we'll,
Correct. No, the attached document.
The attachment, okay.
go ahead and run through it, and then we'll pause at that point.
Yeah, so we tried to kind of get sense from staff, from council in terms of what the general, direction we wanted to head from here was. And so we put together, try to get at some sort of kind of general direction vibes of council. This is what we came up with. So starting off Elm Grove Park, basically affirming the general concept for Elm Grove Park as recommended by the study committee and the planning commission and shown by Simone Collins. Town Square Station Circle, there was, I'll just read the first part of it. Borough Council recognizes the feedback received from community members that the current Station Circle fails to serve as a useful pedestrian space, and that in order to use the space for events like Dickens Festival or the Farmers Market, or to support regular pedestrian activity, it must provide exclusive pedestrian space that does not conflict with parking or vehicular traffic. Borough Council also acknowledges the voices of many of our downtown small business owners who have expressed strong concerns about losing the parking spaces in Station Circle as development continues along Haverford Avenue. So Borough Council affirms the goal of providing both sufficient parking for the downtown businesses in the downtown area and providing a pedestrian space safe for gatherings, events, and regular pedestrian activity. So the idea was to affirm the vision for the space, and to that end, we also have in here that we would be confirming Planning Commission's recommendation that further study may be needed to identify the best layout, specific layout for how that space would operate. And also to, we know we have, pending grant funds from DCED, so that we would expect the manager to see clarity on the ability to adjust the scope and timing for that grant, to potentially use it for further study or refine the plans for that space. So it's a pending grant, but the idea is that we may not be in the position to actually activate that grant immediately, and so when the time comes, which is not here yet, to seek feedback from the state regarding the scope and timing of that grant. There had been a lot of commentary on concerns about the specifics of the layout of the space. So the idea here is that we would be confirming the high-level vision of being able to have a pedestrianized area that is exclusive and separate from the parking in a way that does not exist today, while also maintaining the parking, so that being the goal, and that we would be wanting to see the existing layout as described in the plans, described as a concept that could accomplish the goals, but not necessarily attaching us to the specific layout as provided there. So we would be basically affirming the vision, describing this as one example that could accomplish that vision, but not necessarily specifying that we're going to be following in that exact layout. And to that end, the cost estimates related to that exact layout should be considered as a reference point related to that example layout. And we also wanted to be able to specify that in terms of the phasing for any sorts of future improvements to that space, Borough Council wanted to be really clear that any of that work would be coordinated and phased to avoid any major impacts with other downtown projects. We want to be really clear to folks that obviously any planning with this is going to involve a long timeline, as we know, but just to make it crystal clear to folks that they should not have a doomsday scenario in which all of downtown shuts down simultaneously. That is top of our mind. We've heard that from our business community, and we want to validate those values and articulate that. That coordination is, I think, front of every council member's mind. In terms of Narberth Park, again, we wanted to kind of confirm the general concept vision for Narberth Park, recommended by the Study Committee and Planning Commission and Simone Collins. There was discussion over at the Study Committee, there was a lot of discussion over the skate park, pickleball, multi-use court area. There was discussion, I think that's top of mind for council as well. And so we wanted to specify that the current configuration be noted as the preferred scenario based off of those various recommendations. And including a note that be subject to refinement based on project needs, funding, the unknowns of Sabine Park, which has come up a lot, and other such factors. So even though we know that is an area where the kind of the base of that is failing, we wanted to note that as kind of the preferred scenario for it, despite the fact we know there's a lot of unknowns with that space. As well, the parking lot, we know that there's other unknowns there as well, and so including a note specifying that the parking lot kind of configuration is conceptual and future improvements to that space would occur through a separate consideration. Another thing that has come up a lot, including from staff, including from council, was the circulation, and I think there was a general sense that the reversal of the circulation is kind of outside of the scope of this particular study. It may be the case that we have a future study to consider that, but for now there was a sense that we wanted to defer consideration of street circulation issues at this time and instead show the existing conditions on the plan set. At the future, if that changes, that can be incorporated at that time, but for the purposes here, we wanted to know that everything works within existing conditions.
And I'm going to note also that I think that's one of the issues with the Station Square proposal is that it presupposes reverse one-way, which is the only way you can enter the parking that was shown on that particular diagram. So that feeds into council's general concern that we are not ready, we are not at this time ready to commit to studying, changing, let alone changing the traffic flow on Haverford and Windsor.
Yes,
So,
for sure.
yeah.
There was also a lot of, I think, one of the things that was very top of mind for council members was obviously the need to be able to prioritize. We have a lot of existing capital needs, and our ability to be able to actually meet those needs while recognizing that we do have failing assets in our parks that will need to be replaced in the short term. And so how do we get at some sort of prioritization that can go into our CIP in a way that we're able to actually fund? And so to try to get at that, we wanted to recognize that the full scale improvements of our parks over a longer period of time is kind of good to keep in your mind as what the ultimate replacement cost of all of these assets will be. But we wanted to really get a sense of what our actual priority projects are going to be on a short near term. And so to that end, we wanted to have our staff work on this with Simone Collins to identify priority projects. And we've kind of broken this down here as immediate priority projects, which are ones that are identified as a major priority. We may be in the process of implementing. For instance, some of the projects here dovetail with our CIP already on Wood Avenue Bridge, for instance, some sidewalk improvements, or other things that we have the capacity to implement quickly at minimal cost. Near-term priority projects, which would be ones that are identified as a major priority, and we anticipate working towards implementing within the next 5 years. Just generally. We wanted to identify contingent projects as well. We really wanted to communicate to the community that the community will need to be a partner in this. We have various different community groups. The Friends of Narberth Green Initiatives, I think, was founded with the idea that they would help fundraise. And so contingent projects are really things that fall into that bucket where, hey, this would be a priority, but we don't know if we actually have the funds to do this. And so in order to actually get these things across the finish line, we would need meaningful partnerships with the community. So there would be that bucket. And then the remaining things would be more just horizon needs that we know are out there but aren't necessarily things that we would be approaching in the short term. And then in terms of looking at how you would identify those sorts of things, we took a first crack at what the criteria would be. Health and safety, right, is a big one. Whether a given project is needed for health, safety, accessibility, or regulatory compliance. The consideration of the usability of a given space, whether a given project is needed to provide a usable space or a usable feature for the community, and that includes replacing an asset or an amenity that has reached or will imminently reach its end-of-life status. Cost and benefit, obviously, the potential value of a given project relative to its overall cost and the difficulty of implementation. Community partners, which we've already covered. And low-cost activation projects, which would be whether a given project could help activate a park space or meet unmet needs at minimal cost. There were other things in here that I think are, from here, it seems that they are going to be provided, but we wanted, information on kind of operations, maintenance costs, and programming, some of those things. It seems like I think they're going to be incorporated. They probably just weren't in that draft. Similar things with the funding needs.
Yeah, these are just things that were supposed to be, clearly placeholder text in the draft that, but no actual, discussion of it in the drafts that we saw.
Yeah. We also know that since there had been a lot of engagement prior with community groups, we wanted those to be able to just be notified that, this process is entering the comment phase, and to the extent that, if they could notify during that comment phase whether they have any interest in participating. They probably don't know the amount of funding that they would be able to partner with or anything like that, but if we know that certain groups are having interest in helping raise funds, we think that would be a good thing to identify now, so that going forward the borough can be able to engage with some of those groups and see what their capacity might be. And then there were just some final kind of pieces that we wanted to note, supporting the study committee's recommendation on some tables and seating were a thing that had come up that might be low-cost ways to activate some of those spaces in a way that's not meeting some needs today. The activity library had come up as a concept which kind of lives outside of this process, but the idea that we might be able to work with the Narberth Library to provide some space where maybe some lawn games could live and be taken out to help activate space. So just noting this, that we should have those we, the borough, can have those conversations with the library to see if there's any interest or what the logistics of that might be. And then just noting for the community that we understand that Sabine Park, for reasons related to uncertainty regarding the configuration of that site, was not included in this, but we acknowledge that there's a need to determine the space at Sabine Park, and that will also provide recreational space where certain amenity needs can be met. So I sprinted through a lot of that, which had come via various conversations that we had tried to kind of coalesce that into a given document. So that's where all of that lands.
So I don't know if you, I mean, we'll be sending you, this discussion. I don't know if you want us to try to put it up on the screen or anything or run through it, but do you feel,
I think the one thing, if you want us to.
yeah, if you just want to respond, I mean, you don't have to go in
I think the one thing I would
depth.
just urge you to understand that a master plan is conceptual by nature. And often, as you start to go into design and engineering, I mean, especially when you look at Narberth Park, we weren't working off of a survey. We're working off of GIS data, which is 2-foot contours. We're working off of impervious coverage data from the county. So it's conceptual at best. So, I think when you spend a lot of time kind of describing, like, we like this in theory, and it's just the whole master plan is just a concept. A lot of it might change as you go into design and engineering. So this is a vision that your community has set forward that says this is what we envision. There's a lot of things that change as you start. You might have value engineering, like maybe the whole playground isn't a poured-in-place stable surface. Maybe there's key parts of it that are, and then maybe some of it is an engineered wood fiber that is still accessible, but is a much lower cost. So, there's a lot of room for choices to be made as you go into design and engineering. What you're saying when you adopt a final plan is that we agree to the vision. It doesn't commit you to anything. So something like the traffic study, it doesn't commit you to doing a traffic study. You just say, hey, that was an interesting idea that we did explore from a safety point of view, which was in the realm of our looking at how people got to the park. So that's why we made recommendations on it. So it was in the realm of the study, but it doesn't commit you to following up on that if you think it's an idea that the borough isn't ready to explore for 20 years. There's still, everything within the park can still happen whether or not you change the directions of the roads.
Michael, I thought your description of affirming the general vision for the 3 parks was exactly what Sarah was saying. That's the best you can do at a master plan stage. It leaves you all your options open. The thing that I heard Fred say was I guess the largest geometric change would be to consider the change of direction on the one-way pairs and the entrance into the square or the exit out of the square, right? Those things can happen either way. It doesn't affect the spaces. What it does do is we provided ideas that came up during the process that said, your parks are interconnected to each other, not well yet, but they could be. And they are interconnected with the rest of your infrastructure, stormwater, walkways, parking, all that. And so we could not even change the plans as they exist, and you still have the option to do all the improvements affirming the general vision. So I'm happy to hear the comments tonight.
I'm just going to respond quickly to that. I think that we would have a problem affirming or a document which most of the imagery has the streets orientation changed. I think that the imagery needs to reflect, because I mean, if you're somebody from the community and you're flipping through this and you see this picture, you're like, what's going on? They've changed the roads around. You flip to another part of it and it's the same thing. You're going to assume that is what council is going to do. People are going to come to us and say,
understood.
What's happening? So I think we would like the imagery and, the tone generally to reflect that this is, a traffic study is recommended, but that is not council's vision for what is going to happen in the downtown. So I think that's our...
And that's clear, Fred. And
Okay.
I think, keep in mind, and Jean knows, that the county's trying to plan the mainline greenway through the borough. So that's a potential partnership right there. Keep that in mind. I think they would be a good partner, and they might help you do those things that you could explore those options.
Okay. So I said I was going to pause here. So I think we all had the opportunity to give feedback on this document. Does anybody have objections to what has just been sort of proposed as council? We'll say if we want to add more in a minute, but just what has already been said, does anybody have any objection to
Not an
that?
objection, but just kind of a quick question along the lines of the direction of traffic. You have listed in phase 1 the Windsor crosswalk. Is that dependent on the direction of Windsor Ave?
No, you could start to implement that improvement without narrowing it down to one lane.
Or
You
raise
could-
it?
You could do the table with a minor bump out and still maintain 2 lanes of traffic through there. It's not gonna be a 14-foot, I mean, it's gonna have to be 18.
Yeah, I mean, people are used to doing a little bit of jinking on Windsor anyway. There's a lot of, no, you go now, you do. All right, so I think we're pretty clear on what's already been said. If anybody would like to add more.
Yeah, well, I do think, so one thing, the proposal of, okay, so I guess a couple, 2 things, is you've shown us what's possible, I think we need to see what's realistic now. And I actually think that happens in-house, with Public Works, with our new manager. For example, those grants in spring of 2025 are absolutely not possible. We have a new manager starting next week. We're certainly not going to suggest that. As a council, we also have to consider the size of our borough, both the financial and the staff. Right? Are we going to move Sabine Park and continue that project? Because we can't do both. Our
Move forward, you mean,
neighbors-
not move, right.
I'm sorry?
Move forward on Sabine Park, you said?
Well, are we going to move forward, no, on moving Sabine Park to a new location and thinking about that project, the Sabine Park project, right? We can't do both, to Ira's point, which he has said for 6 years, right? We need to say, what are the couple of things that we can do? So that's a conversation we need to have with council and leadership with staff. I think the next step of that is when neighbors say to me, how are you realistically going to come up with those funds? What are we looking at, 4.2, 1.3, 1, right? How are you going to do that? The answer of, this is just an idea board, this is just an aspiration, is not one that I think reflects any confidence as us as leaders. So for instance, someone on the park committee said to me, can't we just make what we have nice? And I think the problem with adopting a plan that we don't think is realistic, it's not tied to the operational cost of our small borough, if it's not tied realistically to our budget, is that we become paralyzed by saying, well, we can't touch Station Circle because we have this master plan park project happening. And I caution us to adopt something that we don't know that we're going to ever realistically going to be able to support the staff behind or the finances behind. So again, my personal, and I know most of you disagree with that, would be to say, thank you. You all collected an amazing amount of data and community input. Now let's hand that over to our staff and say, what can we realistically do with this? How can we right-size it for Narberth? That would be my preference moving forward.
So I think that's reflected in part of one of the points that we're raising,
Right.
which is that staff should be discussing directly with
I'm
Simone
not-
Collins. And
So I'm not sure Simone Collins needs to discuss that as much as this point. I think we have a fabulously mapped out CIP. We have a new manager coming in with a planning background. We have, an elevated public works position. Yes, everybody. That can say, great, let's now take this and make it Narberth. I think it's time that we could pass that baton. But,
I think the will of the rest of council is to proceed along the process as we discussed here with staff, providing more input and more feedback into the feasibility and the expense, the logic of aligning this with our CIP.
Yeah, that's the next exercise, to get this report in a digestible format that we can then use to fold into the next update of the CIP, where we take that laundry list of things, plug that into our CIP, and then rank that amongst all of our other capital needs and see where they lie.
Sorry.
I just wanted to say, in terms of Narberth Park, we're not proposing any new facilities. They're all replacing what's there.
Right.
So the assumption is that you currently have, and so what we need to do is we need to talk with Jeff and say, how many staff do you have? Do you have enough staff? So that's the one missing component that we need to add. If he currently today has enough staff, we're not adding new facilities that require new staff. So it's just improving your existing facilities. Elm Grove would be the only place where there are some minor new facilities being added, but they're very small in nature. If anything, the boardwalk would be probably the biggest thing that would have a maintenance component, but you can choose materials that would be low maintenance. So in some ways, when you start to replace facilities, if they're done well, it should decrease your operation and maintenance costs. Because you're not having to maintain facilities that are in decline.
I appreciate that, but all of those grants are incredibly laborious for our staff, and we then as a council need to decide what are the priorities in the borough.
Agreed.
We have, you know, and I want to be able to say to my neighbors and the folks that have elected me, hey, we're getting the $4.2 million to do that. Grants are, as Matt said, are coupons and a heck of a lot of work that falls on staff. We have a responsibility to do that, and we have a new borough manager, and we have committed to save mine. So we need to, I believe, organizationally be responsible, because our neighbors, right, and voters are not going to say, I understand this is a conceptual plan. They're going to say, I want to know realistically, how are you paying for this? And when Jeff and Maggie and others are spending X amount of hours writing grants, where is that coming from? And what we found is A, burning folks out, and then they leave Narberth, or B, neglecting other kind of basic municipal functions, which is not a Simone Collins issue. That's a Narberth leadership issue.
I think they'll suggest themselves as helping us out.
Well, you know.
I'm sure they think it's a.
Well, of course, that's true, yes, that's the business, there's the
okay.
business pitch, but that's a conversation that we as a council, and again, I think those of us who have been here 6-ish years.
Yes, so,
Go ahead, Andrew.
I have to say, I'm listening to this, I've sat at this table now 7 years, plus I sat at this table in 2010, 2011 with a different council. So understanding how things work, how the public perceives things, I have to say Cindy's making a lot of sense. And we can all have aspirations. I mean, I would love to be rich and thin. But we have to be a little realistic about the things we have to work with. I think having a vision is great, but this is a lot of money. It's a lot of money, and it's a big lift. Even if we weave it into our capital plan, we're like doubling the size of our capital plan with this. Yeah, yeah.
Well,
I mean, like.
I think it can be refined. I think some of this is replacement costs for things like the basketball courts, which,
Absolutely.
you know,
Yeah.
we will have to replace them at some point. So it's just going to be, I think we got to get a little more clarity as to how much would this be kind of optional new spending. I mean, we're not going to replace the basketball courts. That's
Right, but
going to
they're in
happen.
good condition.
Yeah.
Well,
But
kind
there
of.
are, you're right. I
That's all
think
for
part of what we would like to see is a little more clarity on, how much of this is new and how much of this is maintaining what we already have. Because I think that'll help everybody, you know.
So I want
So
to
we won't have
provide
to
some
necessarily-
clarity on that, especially for the community, because I think that's I want to validate the concerns that you've raised. I also do want to note that when you look through most of this, right, Narberth Park, for instance, it really is, think of that as functional, and it's probably not a perfect one-to-one, right, but it's functionally the replacement cost of the park. And the vast majority of that are assets that we have and are responsible for today. So I don't want folks to come away from this in the community coming out there thinking, oh, this is a, $4-something million plan where the Borough Council wants to redo the entire park. To me, that's not what that is. To me, this is a description of assets that we are already responsible for today. And really doing a gut check for ourselves, right? When we go into discussing any other responsibilities and liabilities that we want to take on in the future, keeping in mind the things that we have today, so that that we always have that on the horizon, that yes, at some point, the basketball courts are going to need to be replaced. They don't today, they won't, in the near midterm, they're in good condition. At some point, there's other assets that are going to fail and that we are going to be on the hook for, and so we need to be aware of that. The goal of the council direction that we put forward is to acknowledge that, say, sure, keep that in mind, and we really need to get down to kind of what are the priority projects of the assets that are failing or are already failed today. Things that are not operating functionally, infrastructure that we own, that we know we need to replace for health and safety, for just the usability of that space. And so that's the goal, is to actually get that down when we're talking about what's actually trying to go into the CIP or those things. That's what we're trying to get towards. Acknowledging that, yes, when you look at this, you go, oh my God, how is Borough Council going to be spending all of that on all these projects? Well, we're not, right? This is just an acknowledgement of the things that we already have, for the most part, that we have to be aware of over the long term, especially when we make other decisions about other recreational assets and spaces. But really acknowledging that, yes, we do have some failed assets that will need to be replaced. And the major kind of value of this exercise to me was, and I'm looking at Dennis Brogan here, was the conversation we had over some of the failed assets and how we're actually going to proceed with those spaces, right? Like the tennis court, skate park conversation was a major conversation, and resolving a vision for that space is difficult, was difficult, and that was one of the major values that came through this process, was, in my own opinion, was being able to have a venue through which we could publicly discuss those sorts of policy issues, and planning for those going forward. So I just don't want, again, I'm just bringing it back, I don't want folks to kind of come away from this, the public being like, oh my God, they're signing us up for, a $1 trillion, huge plan. I just want to level set us on kind of, what this is, what this isn't, and what the true kind of like next step goals are, which I think is to, have a vision that resolves some of those core issues, set a vision for a space that's a blank slate today, so we have a sense of where that's going, even if the specifics of it change. We know kind of like the direction where we want to head, and then just drill down into what the narrower universe of the immediate, figuring out what those immediate projects that are really truly necessary are, so that we can work them into our CIP. So I just wanted to.
So I cut you off, Andrew. Did you have more you wanted to add?
That was it. That was
Okay.
basically it.
Great, go ahead, Ira.
So, are we going to be voting on this motion tonight?
Well, we're giving them guidance tonight, so I don't know if we need a formal vote, but
Okay.
if people are objecting to it, then,
So that's no.
I wasn't planning on making a formal vote on this.
What would the vote be?
It was just on what guidance to
my
give
next
them on the
question.
final draft. I mean,
Okay.
do you have anything,
Can
sorry.
I just clarify, we're not looking for final guidance on the draft until your January meeting.
Right.
Okay.
So you have till
Maggie's
January,
going.
you have January 12th
Okay.
meeting, I believe, to
Well,
give
this
us
is gonna be
final
our
guidance.
preliminary guidance then.
Okay. So,
All right.
okay, so you answered my
Well, because we originally had this, I think, scheduled for January. We added an extra month to the timeline, so that gives us some more time to add final stuff.
So that answers that question.
Okay.
So then my second observation is that a lot of what this document is telling Simone Collins what additional work that you want them to do on this draft that's actually part of our current scope of work. Is that correct?
Believe so.
Right. So it's just like what direction you want them to go in to finalize this, what changes you want to this document to finalize this draft.
That's how I see it.
So,
I think that's right, and also just for us to be able to, because we know what our processes are, to set us on the route to heading towards being able to have a digestible chunk that we can incorporate into our CIP, which is the second kind of level
well,
goal.
I got that, but this is, that's the ask
Yeah.
of the direction that you're giving Simone Collins based on, you know,
Yeah,
the
I think, yeah,
session.
I
This
think
it's
that's
just a set of changes to this
Correct.
set of documents that's already been, you know, contracted. It's just, this is how
Yes.
we want to finish out the project.
Yeah, to be able to get at what kind of the views of council as a body are, so that we can align the policy document with the feedback that council has provided thus far and staff.
But I mean,
Yeah.
but you want like a final work product, a final version of this document that reflects all of
Yes.
Yes.
That is
Yeah,
exactly right.
And that's the main work that they need to do.
Right. I mean, we are asking staff also to work.
No,
on
I
that,
get
so-
that's a different, I didn't
Yeah.
ask about that, I get, like.
It's not just the money counts. We are also, you know, putting some time where, you know, Jeff and Matt and Maggie to work on this too.
Well, that's fair, okay.
Anything else?
No, that, I mean, that's it. I do share Cindy's concerns about the, you know, about how quickly we could actually pull off, you know, big grants. And I do worry about the fairly sizable set of things that are already on the capital plan. And, you know, some of them actually have some urgency.
Well, I think as Michael said, some of this is going to be, you know, well, we need to replace X. How are we going to replace it? And, you know, the plan will say, well, maybe we should change what we're doing a little bit, and the playground should be over here, or it should be accessible, it should be, have a different, you know, format. So a lot of this is how are we going to replace our existing infrastructure when it comes time.
I agree, and one of the items that's on the capital plan, and that's also on here, is that, you know, the Elmwood stream and restoration and the
Good
bridge. So, I mean, there is,
Yeah.
I mean, that's perhaps the most notable area of overlap between the two.
Yeah.
I mean, I will note with that, you know, I've been personally pushing that we should delay that until we have this master park plan ready and until we're able to secure grants. So there.
I know. Okay, so that's all I have.
Example of my fear.
All right.
That's all I have.
Yeah.
Gene?
So I just wanna affirm, like, we have the same concerns about like over-reliance on external funding and all of that. And that is why we're providing this direction to better connect it to our existing CIP so that we can prioritize those things. I'm not gonna belabor that point, but it helps Narberth make it actionable, because it is a lot of long-term vision. It's a long-term roadmap for replacing what we already have and where it's going to go, and how it's going to be generally laid out and meet the needs of our community. But I think looking at it as a document in front of you is kind of overwhelming to see all of the projects. So I think for council and for staff, it will be helpful to just kind of focus that a little bit in terms of the priority projects, near term, immediate, and contingent projects, and then the rest, horizon needs.
Let me go to the folks who haven't spoken.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Yeah, I did have some questions, if I could. One was, you mentioned the cost for the contingencies for Narberth Park were going to be a little bit higher. Like, how much higher do you expect them to be?
So the costs that I showed you were correct. It was the contingency for the stormwater, it was correct in the budget I sent to you. I think we were carrying a 10% contingency for stormwater in Narberth Park. Just because we're finding with construction projects that we're running that if you're going into an underground detention system, which you'll probably need in Narberth Park since there is no open space for surface detention, that the costs are just high. And a lot of that is due to everything that we've seen since COVID in terms of just the cost of piping, the cost of those types of materials. It's just, so that's why we have a larger
Those
contingency for stormwater there.
contingencies apply for the facilities like the skate park, any new facilities going in?
So the idea with a stormwater contingency is we're putting, so you have $1 million in improvements, a 10% contingency, that's your, you're putting that on the improvements. So yes, it's all the improvements is what that contingency or allowance is taking
Okay.
off of.
And so the final report will have those updated numbers.
So the numbers are correct in what I gave you.
Okay.
I made a copying error on the slide, so sorry, I probably shouldn't even have called it out.
And then I had a question about widening the sidewalks as a recommendation around Narberth Park. And the cross-section that you showed, it wasn't really totally clear to me where you would need to relocate the fencing and like other facilities within the park in order to be able to do that. Is that something that Simone Collins could kind of provide more in detail? And I know the cross-section that you showed, it also included the traffic reversal, and we are providing the direction that you take that out of the images. So is that something that Simone Collins could provide?
So I think, just to be clear, at this point, revisions are going to be made between the receivement of draft comments and the final plan. So I just want to be clear, what gets posted on the 18th is what you guys saw, just so that we're all clear about that.
This, yeah, the most recent.
Right.
Yeah, we're not expecting you to
Okay.
change it.
Just, I just want to be clear on that, just to be
Okay.
sure. I'm not quite sure, so again, since we don't have survey of where the fence is, everything's conceptual, I can tell you on Windsor, the idea is that we would not be moving fence lines on Windsor, that the fence line would stay in place. In the area of the basketball court, we do envision that that fence line would probably change. So again, when we showed the phasing, the idea is you wouldn't replace the sidewalk along the basketball court until you reconfigure the basketball courts.
Okay, and is that detail, can that detail be added to the plan? Because
I don't know that we could accurately show that detail. You're talking about lines that would be parallel on top of each other for the most part. Like you wouldn't be able to read it.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I'm asking is because I know that the sidewalk replacement is on our 2025 plan, so I think that's something that's a near-term priority project. So to have more information on that or in terms of guidance.
Yeah, it would have to be done with survey, to be honest, Jean. We can't show you that level of detail without a survey.
Okay. And then the only other question I had was in terms of like the phasing that you have presented, is there anything that council should know in terms of your rationale for that as we work to kind of as you work to revise that phasing according to our prioritization?
Yeah, I mean, we honestly picked things that we thought were due for replacement, and where we thought we could improve accessibility in your park, because especially in a park like Narberth, there is very little accessibility. So to me, the playground is an amazing place where you can add accessibility pretty easily. And then other things are really just based off of, I mean, the tennis courts are something that probably need to be removed. Well, they do need to be removed, because even if you were to build tennis courts, they would have to be brand new construction at this point. But again, I think improving that facility kind of uplifts the whole park. So.
Jim? Can I just start with a question, picking up on that, about having moved the fence to make way for the sidewalk on Haverford Ave? Do you anticipate, maybe you can't answer, but do you anticipate having to move any of the very large fencing that's behind the?
No, you'll notice on the
baseball?
plan that behind the dugouts on Haverford Ave, that sidewalk remains the
Okay,
same way.
because that seems like a daunting project.
Yeah,
so-
no,
Okay.
we told, so, I mean, long-term, if you were to look at options for that intersection, you could potentially widen the sidewalk if it was really important to have 10 feet or 8 feet, depending on what the final width is. I mean, we're showing 10 feet as aspirational, 8 feet might be more realistic. That's always an option, but no, that sidewalk on the plan is shown as 5 foot.
Okay, thanks. So in terms of comments, I agree with Gina and Michael mostly, and the idea that this being a master planning document, this is not an implementation plan, it's not a spending plan. We're not approving spending, and as a visioning document, it's more of a menu of things that might happen in the future, the things that will get prioritized in the future. It's not like we're approving everything, whole cloth. And the beauty of these things beauty of the capital improvement plan is that these things will get ranked year to year. They'll always be prioritized. They'll always float or sink depending on what other, projects need attention. So it could well be that, we get to a year where we were thinking we would do something and it turns out we can't because there are other things that are higher priority. Or in terms of funding availability, if we really can't get to these great opportunities in 2025, they just won't happen. They'll have to wait until, the cycle comes around again. And the judgment of the borough manager would be, hopefully she'll take into account, what we're capable of. So, I have no problem approving this as a master planning document because a lot of work has gone into it. It's a good guidance document. It's a good tool for the next manager. We have a number of other master planning documents that have been approved by previous councils. Like the open space plan, that theoretically millions of dollars to implement that, but it functions as a guidance document. Same with the comprehensive plan, the visioning documents are tools. So that's really all I wanted to say about that.
Just for clarification, the various grants, that's an annual grant cycle, I assume?
Yeah, so
Okay.
we laid out what it looks like if you were to submit a grant,
Right.
it gives you that expectation of just because you submit the grant in the spring doesn't mean you're building a park the next year.
Right,
There's
right.
a
No, I'm-
lifespan to that, so that's more what we were trying to
I'm
demonstrate.
trying to address Cindy's concern, which I think I share of, trying to get these grants together, dealing with the political side of it, getting our state folks in line with that. I think in April is, quite frankly, overly ambitious given the turnover in staff that we have. So, in some ways that's a good thing, I think, because it allows us to breathe a little bit and, not feel like we're getting pushed into this. That gives us time, I think, to integrate the priorities into, gives us time to work with the staff, to integrate into our capital improvement plan and really see how it aligns with our costs, our ability to spend, and what our other priorities are. I think what might be really helpful for me is, we've sort of talked a lot about, and I agree with Michael's point, some of this is replacing assets that need to be replaced. And you sort of just touched on that, I think, in response to Jean's question of part of the phasing recognizes that. It wasn't clear to me when I read the document that that's how the phasing approach was taken, but I do think it would be good for us to, with some degree of deliberativeness, identify really what our failing assets are, and like whether it's the playground equipment, whether it's the tennis courts, like I don't have any good sense of that at all. I don't think that comes through in this. So, and I think from a political standpoint, to say to people, the tennis courts are disappearing regardless. They have to be torn up. They're not in a usable condition. So it makes sense that, there's got to be some sort of spreadsheet with, here are the assets, here's what needs to disappear, here's why. Accessibility is these people will tell you, accessibility and sidewalks is my biggest thing here. That's something that I feel very strongly about, being a pretty active member of this disability community. So, to me, that's a high priority item of getting things up to, not just code, but, making it part of, it fits in with our vision of being a welcoming community to all. So I feel like I need sort of broken down in a way to integrate it into the capital improvement plan, along with really, really strong messaging that this is aspirational. Because Cindy's right, how many times has this council in the past we had these great plans for that cafe. Remember the cafe we were building on the back of?
Library terrace.
On the back of
Yeah,
the library
course,
terrace
yeah.
that went nowhere. I don't know how much, before my time, how
Yeah.
much you people spent on that
My
plan.
time.
We weren't
Spent
there.
on
Nobody
that.
else.
That's for you. I can't.
Andrew's.
Oh, there you go. Sorry, Andrea.
I was part of a very initial,
Yeah.
initial
Yeah,
discussion.
fair enough.
I
But-
stepped down and it exploded, that project.
That's what happens. You see what happens when you leave, Andrew.
Yeah, but I was there, it was just a small little
But in all
thing.
seriousness, you know, we have this, we have this habit of thinking big and then not implementing it all. And I want to be able to think big and deliberately implement, if that makes sense. Like, this is an important thing to know what our, if we say, what is the point of this plan? To know that these are the priorities of what our park wants to look like. And yeah, people would rather have a pickleball court than tennis courts is an important thing to know. So that when the tennis courts get taken out, we don't replace it with an underperforming asset that's kind of, ends up falling apart again.
Do you mind if I just draw a distinction between this kind of plan? Again, this
Yeah.
is a master plan, that depth
I
of the library,
agree.
that was a specific thing, that had engineering behind it, it had,
I know.
it went a long way down the road on a particular project. None of this is that.
Right,
This-
no,
I do think we
that's
all
my
get
point,
that.
Jim, is
Yeah.
that I want to be able to take the master plan and then go into the implement
Mhm.
phase by saying, yeah, it makes perfect sense as part of this plan to replace the tennis courts with pickleball courts. Because A, the tennis courts are falling apart. B, we've decided as a community that we'd rather have pickleball courts. C, it allows us to then create more room for the basketball courts.
Right.
D, it creates, more use creates more use, right? If a higher use project becomes higher use by definition because now the park is more of a gathering point. So all I'm saying is, I want to be able to, make sure that we go from here down to the implementation phase in a very
Right.
deliberate way and, with intent.
I think this document will aid
Oh, I
prioritization
agree.
rather than hinder prioritization.
I agree.
All right.
No,
All right,
I'm not
folks.
disagreeing.
Right,
So-
but I'm sorry, I do want to make one more, because I haven't made an actual request, and this is more, I think, towards F&A and the office. The phasing with the grants. I would like any grant that requires a consultant out of that phasing. I would like Matt, I think Matt, you're actually in a good position now, because I do not want to ask this of Maggie, it's unfair, because she's new and she obviously, to say, what is realistic? Knowing we are prioritizing Sabine, knowing we have the development of 230 that's going to be a couple years, right? Knowing the trash contract, right? Knowing all of the things that are on the plate. What is realistic for the staff to apply? How many grants is it? Is it 2 grants a year? Is it 1 grant a year? Not hiring a consultant. How? And then give me what this looks like. I want to think big. I want to think realistic, right? Saying, here are 10 grants that you can do, but it requires a consultant to do that is not helpful. It is a critique we get of council and one that we should listen to. I want to know what's realistic for staff to manage, because even if you do a consultant, we all know that it still sucks. It's staff time.
Yeah, I think that'd be super helpful to have. And I think we can work that into this for sure, because I think that's very helpful.
All
Absolutely.
right, I'd like to
Thank
just pause here. Thank you, Cindy. So we've already heard that you're expecting kind of the final feedback in January. So the next step is, this is going to go onto the borough's website December 18th, you said? And we'll be hearing more public feedback at that point, presumably. We'll have our new borough manager's feedback by January. So, I anticipate we'll revisit again in January and see if there are any additional points we want to make based on the public feedback and based on Maggie's feedback as borough manager. For now, I think we have our list of the initial points that we'll pass along to you. Matt or Jeff, do you have anything to add here? This is mostly council's show at this point, but.
Yeah, nothing additional,
Okay.
just to reiterate what I've already said, and that the value of the final plan will be the nuggets that we can incorporate into the capital improvement plan, because that will be your decision-making point to actually construct these things. And then grants become a discussion, once you put it on the capital improvement plan, once you prioritize it, once you tee it up for actually moving forward with a specified project, then you can start looking at different types of grants to supplement, to be a coupon.
Found money.
And you think that this kind of direction helps us head in that direction?
Okay. All right, so I think we have our direction. Thank you for listening. Obviously, this is, a big deal for the community, and, you saw how many community responses you got in that survey.
Yeah.
I think it, reflects a lot of community interest in this and council interest as well. All right, so we have, the remaining items are the committee reports and then public comment, is anybody still waiting online, do you see? Likely commenters. All right, so let's do the committee reports. Does the infrastructure committee want to?
We did not meet.
You did not meet, all right. Finance and administration?
Yes, finance administration, we are proceeding through our review of boards and commissions. In progress is Human Relations Commission, in conversation with Rebecca Starr. Mike is leading that up. And next will be, we're entering into Shade Tree Commission, review of the Shade Tree Commission charge and the Shade Tree Ordinance, I hope, too. And we're also in the middle of our communication review that's going to have several exciting suggestions already that we hope to share with you soon. If anyone has any interest or input in that, let me know and we'll get it in.
We're expecting for Kelsey to make a proposal to FNA about the website and changing our website manager. So if anyone's interested in that discussion, separately from Borough Council, come to FNA.
You mean like on the borough's end, or do you mean like a vendor?
Vendor.
Yeah,
We're
okay.
going to change vendors for a new platform that well, she's going to make a recommendation. She went over with me her thoughts, and I generally agreed. So there's going to be a recommendation for a new vendor for our website, but it also changes the functionality of the website in I think, vastly improved ways. So.
Is that different from what we've funded for, or is this
No,
related to the
It's
funding?
included in the
for-
2025 budget.
It is within the budget.
Great,
That's even the best, yeah. So.
okay. Thank you. Public health and safety?
So Public Health and Safety met on November 8th. No actions were taken. The draft PAC is being finalized. The committee is planning to vote on that next week. Chief String provided the engineer's review and report to the residents who submitted the traffic concerns for 200 block of Price Avenue. And he made that outreach. Director Eldon provided estimates for traffic calming solutions on Iona and Meeting House Lane. That was bump outs on Iona Avenue, totaling 12,200, and temporary speed bumps on Meeting House Lane at 2,700 each. The new striping for expanded parking along Haverford Avenue is complete. Chief String reached out to Lower Marion Township regarding adjusting the light at the Winwood Tunnel.
Really? That would be great.
Fabulous. And he's also reaching out to PennDOT. And Director Eldon also obtained pricing for the Mainline Greenway signage fabrication for the Narber segment of the route. And we already have money for it in the 2024 budget, correct?
Yes.
And it was also 10% of the cost that Lower Marion had quoted. So.
We should let Lower Marion know that.
No, we should bid it out to Lower Marion and take a cut.
Good work.
I also connected with the Lower Marion Health Advisory Council, and they're seeking to collaborate with the public health and safety on traffic concerns and safety concerns.
What is that? Is that a government group?
It's an advisory board
Okay.
that reports to the Board of Commissioners.
Okay.
And then EAC met with the Lower Merion Township Sustainability Director to explore a potential partnership on a composting program. And they've indicated that they're interested in a partnership with Narberth for their pilot program and a grant that they're applying for in the spring.
So we would be joining them? Like they have an existing pilot program that we could participate in?
Right.
Okay. Just figuring out who's driving the bus there, all right.
And then, that was it for public health and safety.
All right. Sorry, PAC you mentioned, what is that? I
Oh,
can't
police
remember.
advisory.
Police advisory,
Yeah,
okay,
sorry.
that's fine.
And then, should I provide an update on Parks and Rec Board? They met on in November as well.
If they took action, I mean, is there?
Yes, they did. So they met on November 13th. They have a new member, Jamie Day. They voted to recommend the installation of an AED unit at Narberth Park. So this will go to infrastructure first and then to Public Health and Safety Committee.
For 7 years.
The estimated cost is $2,800. And then Director Eldon provided a State of the Parks report. And I also just wanted to mention this because it's related to the Master Parks Plan. They discussed parks programming for 2025. So there was a lively discussion about making outreach to other organizations to partner with on programming at the parks. Family movie nights came up, environmental educational programming at Elm Grove Park, cornhole tournaments. So a lot of good ideas, and they're thinking like starting in the spring, April programming. And they also talked about signage at the parks for tree identification. And Director Eldon already has an inventory, I believe, with QR codes. So
Just need to
sounds
print out
like-
the cute little plaques.
yeah, it sounds like something that would be fairly easy to implement.
Who is in charge of programming? Like, are they proposing to be in charge of programming?
So that's actually a good segue. I think it would be helpful for us as council to also provide them a charge for direction. It does sound like they have good interest in developing some programming in partnership with some other groups, community groups. And if council feels that it's like a good direction for them, we can provide that.
Okay. Maybe for January, I mean, we'll think about that. It's nice if they want to volunteer to organize programs, that does seem very helpful. Okay, thank you. Let's move on to, I have one quick comment, which is that the HARB is moving forward on a historical marker request for Minerva Parker Nichols, or if I got the name right, architect, early woman architect, one of the first in the country, who has several houses here in Narberth that are still standing and still resemble the original design. So they're working on a process for a state historical marker. Does anybody have a problem if I draft? I mean, I've been involved with this proposal. I've been on their tours and things. So, if you have a problem if I draft a letter in support of this on behalf of
Where would it
council?
go?
Yeah, it would probably go. It might go on Haverford Ave. There's two houses that are just off of Haverford at like, where is that? Just past the Great American Pub, like there's two houses just off of Haverford that are Minerva's, and then there's one on Montgomery as well. So those are the two locations that were identified as possible. But I think staff is going to look into where exactly it would go. But it would go near the houses, near one of the houses. Is the short answer. Okay, so I'll let you know. It'll be an update maybe in February on that. Let's move on to public comment. Anybody in the room? So you have 3 minutes. Please give your name and your address, and then begin your comment. So if
Great. Joe Stratton, 402 Dudley.
you want to stand up.
Oh, you, thank you. Joe Stratton, 402 Dudley in Narberth. 3 quick topics. One, Jeff, want to thank you and your crew for rapidly getting rid of the tree that fell down on an 11-degree wind chill night. Thank you. The next comment is, we're a really great conversation. I learned a ton today. I wanted to express concerns about the parking loss at Station Circle, and it comes from a perspective of, I was really glad to see in the vision that age and accessibility are really important parts of the vision, and appreciate that, Mike, in your statement you said we're going to maintain the parking. There are 14 parking spots there. One is handicap accessible. I think the only handicap accessible spot on the Haverford Business District. And I want to make sure from an age and accessibility standpoint that we're not losing those. I encourage council to, there have been several unusual years lately with the loss of American Family Market, the loss of Rickland's, COVID, and the loss of the businesses on many businesses on the south side of Haverford that have changed parking needs. And I think it'd be important to, as the new condominiums open up, as the new parking, as new businesses open up in 230 Narberth, we might want to see what the parking needs are after all of that opens up before we consider getting rid of 7 key parking spots. There are many people who use those spots who would otherwise probably not shop or participate in Narberth. The third point is, thinking about, I reviewed the planning document, master planning documents this afternoon, and I had a lot of questions that were answered here. And hearing that the same master planning documents are going to be posted on December 18th, questions related to, if they're posting the change in the direction of the Windsor and Haverford, I'm not suggesting you change the documents. It sounds like that's not possible, but there are going to be so many questions that come up. It's going to be, I think, very, very confusing to the public to post those documents without a lot of explanation. So I just wanted to share that, in my read of those documents, as somebody who attends council and other meetings, I knew I could come here and get those answered. If I was reading them on December 18th, I don't know who I would reach out to with what the heck is going on. Thank you very much.
I thought we gave them direction to switch those.
Yeah,
but they're not going to have it by
Not
the
before the
18th.
18th.
Yeah, but you could put.
Contextualize.
You can put a
Yeah.
lead paragraph that
Yeah.
says
Disclaimer.
Yeah. I think
especially
we
that
should
one
do
point
that.
about the direction of the street.
I would put a stamp.
We're not
No
gonna
one's gonna read a paragraph. They're gonna look at the picture and go, what the hell, council's gonna, and our emails are gonna blow up. I would have them, if they can't change the drawings, stick a stamp on that puppy. Because I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
People are gonna freak out.
People don't read paragraphs.
They don't read paragraphs.
You're gonna have a freak out.
We'll consider how to present that information in
In red, in a ball.
Thank you, that's a good suggestion. All
Just
right.
edit the arrows out of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm serious.
Dennis?
Dennis.
Hold on, guys.
I was just here to see the presentation, but I was surprised to learn that there is not a $5 million rainy day fund. So that threw me off, but no,
I thought you were gonna pay for it.
Yeah.
He does the broken part.
the lottery ticket didn't pay off. So, just keep doing what you're doing. I think, I think ultimately, I think having been here regrettably, or not really, but looking around, I think longer than anybody else in this borough, I think what people want is they want to see some action. They want to see something happen. And so what Mike was saying about assets and Cindy was saying about the voters, I think, look at the park, in my view, where is it, are they really active? And that's where the kids are right now, in the fields. And if you can do something right now or shortly to improve the fields, to improve where the kids' park is, and maybe even for people that want to walk to a side or with a buggy, the sidewalks, that might be a good place to start because you'd see some immediate response. Unfortunately, you're all hung up, and I don't mean you've done anything negative, but we're all hung up with these projects that are just kind of hanging out there, and the public gets a little frustrated, in my mind, from what I hear people say. I'm not saying we can do something, I don't know, but I do think that they're frustrated. So if you could show them something happening, I think that'd be a big plus.
Thank you. Anybody online wish to make a public comment, please raise your hands. And, okay, go ahead, Madam.
Carol Marie?
Hello, everybody. So I do have several questions. I'd like to know about any updates for 201 Sabine and Sabine Park, any assessment, RFP, RFQ, developers in play. Is Penrose still involved? And also, Cindy, you mentioned several times that prioritizing Sabine. What is that priority or the plan for Sabine? Next question, unless you want to answer that one.
Why don't you go ahead and finish your comment, Carol Marie?
Okay, next question. How many people actually pay to park at the 201 Sabine lot? Right now, there's a Philadelphia landscaper who uses his space for storing equipment and tons of junk. It's not just a space for a truck. He's like running his business out of there, and it looks horrible up there. Next question, are any other streets getting speed bumps or speed pillows? Next is, what was the process to hire the borough manager? I'm wondering how long was that position advertised? How many candidates applied? And did you reach out to Ms. Dobbs for the position, or did she reach out to you? And then piggybacking on the gentleman that just spoke, I'm sorry I couldn't see because the thumbnail is so small. Timeline for the park, you talk about shovel in the ground, look like 2028. There also, I think, needs to be a real consideration given for what happens to the existing space in each phase. Like if you are moving Candy Cane City and improving Candy Cane City, what's going to happen to the area that is the current Candy Cane City and the play equipment? Is it going to be a mud pit? Because a 10-year construction project really will not be well received by park users. Having something done, completed, finished, and then moving to the next, but having it be a long-term construction project isn't going to be really good for the people who use the park. Now, those are my questions, and,
All right. Let me begin by saying we have no news on 201 Sabine. There have been no changes, no updates. The plans that were referred to are the ones that council has discussed in the past that are up on the borough website for everyone to look at. Your comment about the landscaper, you should email Matt or Jeff or something, and they'll look into that. The borough office will take care of that. Speed bumps are in the budget for Meeting House Lane for next year. Your comment about the timing of the park planning, I mean, yes, we're not going to do everything all at once. We're not going to have stuff out of, things will be done piece by piece and should not be, taken out of action for an extended period of time. We will work on one area of the park, update make whatever changes are needed to be made, and then deal with it promptly. I mean, I think nobody wants to have the park unusable for long periods of time. The borough manager process, it was sort of mutual. I think we were, we worked with Maggie Dobbs before through she was our assigned planner from Montgomery County Planning Commission, and had worked with lots of folks here, probably you as well, during the comprehensive planning process. She spoke to a lot of folks in the borough at that time, so I don't have a lot to add there.
so did any other people apply for it, or was it advertised?
There were several other applicants. There were multiple other applicants.
I'm sorry, say it again?
There were multiple other applicants. What's that?
There were two, there were not multiple, and there was
Well, we had
internal
four.
process. Oh, there was four, okay,
There's four.
final.
There are multiple other
Final.
applicants. We interviewed two people. All right, thank you, Carol Marie.
All right.
Is there anybody else online that wishes to make a comment? Please unmute yourself. Okay. I believe public comment is over. Any announcements for the good of council?
It's First Friday, this coming Friday, so I'd encourage all to come out and support local businesses.
Thank you. I'll take a motion to, oh wait, do we have an executive session? All right, there is no executive session tonight, so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor of adjourning? All right,